Today on Across the Fence, we go to the movies with The Shawshank Redemption. A forthcoming book from a University of Vermont professor examines how this box office bust has become a cultural and financial phenomenon and one of the most popular films ever. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Keith Silva, in for Judy Simpson. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone who's never seen The Shawshank Redemption. Tougher yet might be to find someone who doesn't like it. Its popularity has saved historical sites and become a financial boon to the Ohio communities where the movie was made. How this little runt of a movie was at first dismissed and then beloved is a story that if it was made into a movie, you might not believe it. Joining me today is University of Vermont English professor Tony Magistrali, the winner of the 2001 Outstanding Faculty Award at UVM. Welcome back to Across the Fence, Tony.
Thanks, Keith. Pleasure to be here.
So let's do our due diligence for that 1% of the population that have not seen The Shawshank Redemption. What is it?
Well, simply put, it's a prison movie. The main character, one of the main characters, there are two of them, is named Andy Dufresne. He's played by Tim Robbins. He's unjustly convicted of murdering his wife and her lover, and he goes to Shawshank prison for life. He escapes after 19 years of incarceration, and then the movie then takes over, moves to the second major character, whose name is Red, played by Morgan Freeman, and then it becomes his story. In fact, one could make the argument that it's always his story.
When this movie was released, as we said, it was sort of a box office bust, but it's become so popular. So what was wrong in 1994? What did this movie have going against it?
Well, I don't think there was anything wrong in 1994. It was just up against some pretty good competition, up against films like Speed, Dumber and Dumber, which is not pretty good competition, Forrest Gump, right, which was nominated for all the awards that Shawshank was, and Forrest Gump won them all. It just ran into competition in the cinema that really didn't lend itself very well to attracting a mass population. It is, after all, a slow film. It's
2.5 hours, and it's takes place primarily in a prison. There are maybe one or two roles for women, not too many. Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman weren't really stars, right? So there were things that it had going against us. What was your experience with the film? Did you see it in the theater?
Well, like everyone else in America, I discovered it after its theatrical release, where it did not do very well.
Right.
And this is the phenomenon of Shawshank. It came out at a time when, of course, there were video cassettes and blockbusters.
Right.
And word of mouth is what sold this film.
Word of mouth and cable television, I think. I think that's another big part. That's one of the big changes.
But that came later, Keith. The cable television came later. First, there were the video cassettes. And the video cassettes is what sold this thing. People told each other, go rent this film.
Okay. So back when you could rent video cassettes for some folks out there, that's where it built that word of mouth. Go see this, and then people could buy the film. And
exactly.
So when does it go on to cable? When does it become this staple of basic cable?
I think shortly after it makes its headway as a phenomenon on video cassette.
Okay.
And not too far away from that, because of course cable's very important to talking about the success of this film in terms of popularity.
Right. You're working on a book. You're sporting, if our Ryan can show us, you've got your Shawshank Redemption Reunion T-shirt. You're working on a book, The Shawshank Experience, right now with co-author Maura Grady. What was the genesis of the book, Tony?
It began a year ago when I was invited to go to Mansfield, Ohio, the place where they filmed Shawshank, to give the keynote address at the 20th anniversary of the release of the theatrical release of the film. It premiered in a theater in Mansfield called the Renaissance Theater, and there during its premiere, all of the stars were there. But for the 20th anniversary, only the major star was Bob Gunton, who played the warden.
The warden, right. At this event, you got to you hosted a roundtable discussion with some of the actors or people that were involved in the making of the movie. Did they think that they were working on something that was special? Did they think, I mean, obviously they didn't think they were working on the most popular movie of all time, but what was the feeling from the cast while the movie was being made?
Well, they knew that they had something special here, largely due to the fact, largely due to the strength of the screenplay. And this is what eventually sold the film to Castle Rock, because Frank Darabont wrote the screenplay, and Frank Darabont demanded that he direct it. And he had only one other film under his belt prior to directing Shawshank, and that was A Woman in the Room.
A short film, almost a student film. Yeah.
Exactly right. So Castle Rock really took a risk here. They invested a great deal of money in this film, and they took a risk with an unproven director who insisted that he be the one to direct this film. And because of that, Castle Rock originally wanted they wanted Tom Hanks to do it, and they wanted Cruise too. Tom Cruise. And Hanks was busy with Gump. He would later come on board with, of course, The Green Mile. And Cruise agreed to do it. He loved the script. But the problem was he wanted Rob Reiner, who at the time was the CEO of Castle Rock, to be the director. It was the only way he would work on the film, is if Reiner directed it. And Reiner said, I can't. We have agreed to allow Frank Darabont to do this, so Cruise passed. And
they had just, Cruise and Reiner had just made A Few Good Men, so it would have been a different movie. When you were at this reunion, there are people there from all sorts of walks of life. There are fans of the film. This movie has a passionate following. You don't get to be number one. You argue in the world. We can maybe save that for another discussion. But why does this movie draw in such diverse people? Criminologists, musicologists, fans, teachers. Why?
I just think that it's a beautiful film. First of all, on a fundamental level, it's a wonderful film about friendship. It's a wonderful film about endurance. It's a wonderful film about hope. And there are plenty of people out there who have never been to prison, who do not have felony records. But many people suffer from bad marriages, from jobs that they hate, from addictions, from deaths of their parents' children, things that stay with them, that linger. And I think that Shawshank is a promise. It's a promise that there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
So you see all those things in this movie, all those hopes, dreams, aspirations tied into this movie about a prison that in some ways looks like a kind of a fun place to be at times. I mean, and suffers in that case from sentimentality in some ways. That this feeling of, hey, guys walk around, the guards. There's one mean guy, but you sort of get away with it.
Well, I like to call it the gap. The Hollywood gap between reality and movie making. And of course the fact that there are no women in this film, although one of the things I argue in this book is that this is a film all about women.
Right, because there's a lot of relationship things here and a lot of senses that there are roles being played by Red or by Andy at times that would be the female role were there a woman cast in it.
Absolutely right, but don't forget those posters on Andy's wall.
What are the posters? For folks that may not have seen it, what posters? Andy cycles through these posters and it becomes a very key thing for the story later on.
Well, key.
Who are the women?
Key primarily because it hides the escape hatch. Right. It hides the tunnel that Andy will use to go all the way down to Mexico.
Right.
And it starts off with Rita Hayworth. In fact, that is the name of the novella that Stephen King wrote, Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. Rita Hayworth is the first photograph, the first still, and then it moves to Marilyn Monroe, and then it moves to Raquel Welch. Right. And in King's novel, there's also a poster of Linda Ronstadt on the wall, too. But I think one of the key arguments that I'm making in part of this book is that each one of those women represent a facet of what Andy's becoming. These are all strong women. These are all defiant women. These are all women who inspire. And this is what's happening to Andy as he's going through the changes of 19 years of incarceration.
Right. We went, I think, almost halfway through the show, and we finally said the word Stephen King. There's a lot of fans of this movie and people you met at the reunion there in Ohio that don't even know this is a Stephen King book. He was left out of the marketing. So where are they? How do they connect that? Why is that?
Well, first let's talk about why he was left out of the marketing.
Sure.
This was a deliberate attempt on Castle Rock to move the film in a direction that would suggest realism rather than supernaturalism.
Okay.
So that's why King's name was left out of this, the production, even though he's listed in the credits, of course.
Right.
Now, the reason I think that a lot of people don't recognize, and this is another aspect of what I'm talking about in this book, is that even though it would seem on the surface that this is not a Stephen King-like film, it really is.
Right.
Because we've got a protagonist who's very similar to many of the protagonists in Stephen King's world.
I want to talk about the prison, which is a central character in this in a minute, the Ohio State Reformatory. But I want to ask you very quickly, because we talked about King, there's a difference between the endings in these books. And when the movie came out, the ending is seen as very sentimental, sort of a cheat, and the book ends differently. Can you quickly sum that up and what your feeling is on those?
There's an enormous amount of scholarship that's been written about the Shawshank Redemption, the film,
right.
Not so much the novel. And a lot of that scholarship almost unanimously feels that the film should have ended with Red on the bus on his way to Mexico, with the last word of the film, hope. Okay. When Castle Rock saw that ending, they showed it to demographic groups that often happen with Hollywood films, especially major productions. Everyone wanted to see a reunion on the beach. Now, that reunion has been criticized by a lot of the scholars who write about this book, the film, as being sentimental, as an indulgence to the masses, if you will. That's not my take on it at all. I think that the ending, Stephen King ends his novel with the bus,
right.
But I think the ending of the film makes perfect sense. This is a movie all about rock and stone, and it ends in sand, which is essentially the culmination of Andy pulling his hole out into the prison yard.
Right.
It also is a film that features lots of images of gray and dark blue, and in the ending, we're surrounded by color.
Yeah, that all sort of gets washed away.
That's right.
Just a few minutes left. The Shawshank Redemption, as I said, was shot at the Ohio State Reformatory. What's the importance of the prison in this movie?
Wow, well, I think you say it well. The prison is a character in this movie. It really is it's a magnificent structure. It's a Gothic structure that was built in the 1890s. It began as a reformatory, so it began with an element of hope to it.
Right.
It wanted young men to believe in a life after prison. So it gave them educations. Many of these young people were not educated, did not have high school education, so it provided them with that. It gave them viable jobs and careers in plumbing and electrical work and carpentry and woodworking. And then it changed because the reformatory stopped being a reformatory in the 50s and became a warehouse for felons. And that it's really interesting that the ending, the ending of its history corresponds with Andy's time in Shawshank.
And the movie, actually, the interest in the movie has saved this building. We saw there in the clip, the Shawshank Trail, that people go there, they can go there and be in the prison. It's not a movie set, it's a real prison, and that's really done a lot. Just about a minute left, Tony.
I think the one thing to remember about the Shawshank Trail is that it really capitalizes on the two strains of interest here. The film is the most important that brings people to Mansfield, Ohio, and then there is prison tourism. The same reason people go to Alcatraz, the same reason people go to the Elmira Reformatory is to view prison experience. That's a whole other ball of wax that we could talk about
Right.
at some point,
Right.
but that's what the OSR represents as well. It is that American prison experience.
Well, we'll have to have you back, Tony, to talk about prisons and all sorts of other exciting stuff right now. Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone here at WCAX for making this program possible. And as always, thank you for stopping by Across the Fence.